We're joined now by Sergeant Rocky Sickmann, Rodney Rocky Sickmann, but he tells me I can only call him Rocky. Only your mom calls you Rodney. He is United States Marine Corps for 444 days, was a prisoner of war in Iran. And when he's with us, we love talking about Folds of Honor. Our friends at Bud Light and Anheuser-Busch. You see the Bud Light can here, the Folds of Honor can. 13 years Anheuser-Busch has partnered with Folds of Honor, and this is one of the reasons why. And they've donated more than $21 million. Foldsofhonor.org to find out more, foldsofhonor.org. It's always great to talk to you again. And it's an amazing organization. Let's start by talking about Folds of Honor, which is an incredible organization.
It is, Ryan. In 2007, Major Rooney formed the organization over his garage, he and his wife. And 13 years later, here we are. Anheuser-Busch. At that time, when I first met him in 2007, I was director of military sales. Made a cold call, came into St. Louis. He put his flight uniform on. Security calls me and says, hey, there's this guy down in the lobby who wants to talk about a military program. I go downstairs, and sure enough, he caught my attention. He tells me his story. I tell him my story. And so all these years later, 13 years, $22 million plus dollars, and now this year Bud Light's coming to the table with $3 million to help provide. We've expanded Folds of Honor mission. When it first started, it was just military. Now we're providing scholarships to children, spouses of fallen, disabled military, and now first responders. So this year, from October 17th to November 26th, Bud Light has provided $3 million for first responder families to go out to apply for scholarships.
So go back to the story of, and it's amazing how things just, they happen organically. And that's what happened with Folds of Honor. And you had told us the story earlier, and I think it's a fascinating story on, he's on a plane, and he sees this image, and something clicks.
He just, Lance, he just returned from his second tour of duty in Iraq, flying an F-16. And he was returning home and flying from Chicago to Grand Rapids, Michigan. They land late night, and the pilot asked everybody to remain on board because they were bringing the remains of a fallen soldier. As he is hearing this story, he looks down to the right and sees the casket being taken from the fuselage with a flag, and looking down, there's this little boy on the tarmac, his son, that again would never be able to go fishing with his father, kick a soccer ball, the things that we take for granted each and every day, and his poor wife standing there. And so the pilot had asked everyone to remain on board the flight to pay respect to this individual. 20 minutes later, the pilot said, thank you for remaining. Major Rooney, at that time he's a major, now he's lieutenant colonel, but at that time the pilot comes on and says, thank you. Major Rooney gets up, wiping tears away from his eyes, and looks around and realizes that over 3/4 of the people on the flight just left. Nowhere to go than a warm blanket that this individual lost his life, gave his life to provide them. So he was so just distraught. He came home and told his wife that, people don't get it. Freedom is not free. And he saw the other side, how he needed to do something. So in his garage in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, he basically put together this organization, Folds of Honor. And, again, at this time, I'm working for Budweiser. Anheuser-Busch has been supporting the military for over a century. And so 2007, Major Rooney knew that he needed to get with the Anheuser-Busch because they had supported. And here I was, the director of military sales, and I was supporting military all over the world. And so that was synchronicity. I retired in 2016, came on board, and now I'm continuing to work to raise funds. And funds that we're doing 51,000 scholarships since 2007, $240 million. And 45% of our recipients are minority. And out of that 45%, 57% are females, because it's the families that are taking care of many of these people. And so every dollar that comes into Folds of Honor, 90 cents goes back into that scholarship.
Wow. Yeah. So it's an amazing organization.
We have a great chapter here in Alabama, and that's why I'm here. Last night I got to speak to many of them. This morning we had a golf outing, Patriot Shootout, and spoke to them. But we have about 33 chapters that basically form. because we have a lot of great, wonderful Americans that want to do more, and they're just looking for some direction to help guide this. And so the chapter here is, we've got about 300 recipients probably in the state of Oklahoma, and about $1.5 million that they raised to give to recipients here in the state of Alabama. So when they make those dollars stay here.
I've always heard when there's like a catastrophic crisis that everything slows down. And I want to take you back November 4th, 1979, and what that date means for you and how that morning to afternoon played out for you.
You know, what's really interesting, Lance, is November 4th is right around the corner. It's this Saturday.
Yeah, most people are like, Alabama, LSU.
Yeah.
A little more significant for you.
Yeah. Well, that morning of November 4th, it was that was the day that my freedom was stripped, and our dignity, freedom, and our pride. But it was drug out when we eventually. And I could go through the whole story, but I don't think we have the time. But when we were eventually told to give ourselves up, 7 Marines held that American embassy for 4 hours, waiting for the host government, the Islamic Republic of Iran. That morning of November 4th is when the war on terrorism started. The Islamic Republic of Iran, when they attacked a diplomatic immunity, an American embassy, they became terrorists, and they've not looked back. But that day, they tied us to a chair, and it was pretty chaotic, radical. And of course, they were coming around with cameras. Who are you? And it was just name, rank, and social security number, just what they teach you in the military. And you're just sitting there thinking, there's no way. I'm 22 years of age, and I'm thinking I'm from the small town of Krakow, Missouri, 10,000 miles away from home. There's no way that this is going to last. And I'm thinking, it's going to end any day. That night, you slept in that chair, and when you're tired, you can sleep. And, there are gunshots going off everywhere, and you had no idea what was happening. And you were waiting for the host government to come in. Then you were waiting for the military. I was on float in the Mediterranean till March of 1979. So I had just gotten off float. I was on float a whole year. And in January of 1979, the American embassy, it was January, February, the American embassy was attacked because the Shah of Iran fled the country. And there were 20,000 Americans in the country of Iran as of January of 1979. We were on a helicopter carrier, and we were on standby to go in to help retrieve and gather all the Americans and get them out of the country. At that time, they allowed, I don't know how many 747s to fly over, get the Americans, and many of your listeners might be some of those individuals that are out there. They were allowed to get on the airplane and leave. So when I got there, and I was on standby on a helicopter carrier in a CH-53, locked and loaded to go in to help these individuals. Little did I realize that November 4th, I'm sitting there waiting. I know that the guys are out there. They're ready to come in to get me. Day 1, day 2, day 5, day 20, day 50, nobody's coming. And again, as I said earlier, you're sitting there tied to a chair that time, and it was, unless it was your interrogation were you allowed to speak, but you're sitting there thinking that the Vietnam War had just ended in 1975. And those Vietnam veterans, when they came home, nobody cared about them. And there were thousands of Vietnam veterans. Here we were, just 60 some Americans, and thinking that if nobody cared about those 1,000 people, who's going to care about 60 some people in an American embassy, 10,000 miles away from home? Little did I realize I was wrong. Ted Koppel, Nightline, was created. Tony Orlando, he, what was it, tie yellow ribbon there on the old oak tree? He came out with that song during Vietnam. The Vietnam War ended. All of a sudden, the hostage crisis came. All of a sudden, we came back in light, and he came out of mothballs. And he always thanked me for bringing him out of mothballs, tie yellow ribbon. So, but yeah, little did we realize, but it was just, as I mentioned earlier, the upbringing from my parents, they taught me 3 things: love of family, love of faith, and love of country. And all those memories of growing up in that small town Like I said, playing hockey on Bestie's Pond, sleigh riding down Aholtz Hill, playing basketball at St. Gertrude's, and playing Indian ball. We won state championship in 1973 when I went to Washington High School. We're going to be put into the Missouri Hall of Fame coming up in November because we've never won state championship. And I can tell you, I played every position, or I didn't play every position. I was an underclassman, but I played special teams. But I relived that game. Relived my baseball games. I relived my basketball, which I sat on the bench a lot. But I dated every girl I dated. And just I sold my grit route, riding my bike and selling grit, which I would have to ride my bike 5 miles. And I pedaled my bike throughout the whole route, just to keep my mind in a positive sense, because I was in a dark place that you didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel.
Can you put your finger on the day? Was there a day where you're like, this is how it's going to end? I'm not going back to the United States?
You know what, Ryan? Each day you didn't know if you were going to live or die.
Yeah.
And
that started day one, really, right?
It really did. Yeah, because when you're hearing those gunshots, and they would take you and put you into a kitchen. And you ever go through a difficult time in your life?
Yeah.
Not like this, but yeah.
But
I mean,
but did you feel like eating?
No.
So how do you feel like eating when you're held hostage? And behind you are the guards sitting there with, and they put a piece of bread and some goat cheese and a date on it. You just didn't feel like eating.
How much weight did you lose?
I have no idea. I probably lost maybe 50 pounds. I mean, you were draining. I mean, cleaning yourself. They had a bar of soap in the bathroom. And the American Embassy was a beautiful complex. It was a 23-acre compound. And in our seat, you would go in, and at the first time I think I took a shower was like probably 2 months into it. Now every morning I take a shower. You know why? I can. Sometimes I take 2 showers, and sometimes I take 3 because I can. But back then you had to take a bird bath. And little did I understand the Marine Corps. Going through boot camp, they taught you how to clean your clothes with a bar of soap, running water, and a slab of concrete. And little did I realize that I would take my pants off, wear my underwear, clean my pants with a bar of soap after I brush my teeth with that bar of soap. So you clean that bar of soap because who was using it before you? You have no idea. You clean that bar of soap, try to remove whatever that was on there, and that bar of soap and your finger was your toothbrush and your toothpaste. And then you would just break down, and they would sit there and they're watching because you have no privacy. You're not taking a shower, you're taking a bird bath. And so you fill up the sink and you're using this towel that used to look white as this countertop. Now it's as dark as could be and dirty, but you have to use something to dry yourself off. And so you would clean your pants, wear your underwear, and go in and hang your pants over the chair that you would tie to. And the next day, you would put your pants on, they're a little damp yet, and then wash your underwear. And you clean your body. But it was survival.
Is it true roughly a month before you were held hostage, you wrote back to your parents in the Midwest and you said, hey, this guard duty in Iran's a pleasant gig?
It was. Being a Marine security guard really is an elite duty. And obviously, I didn't realize I would be in a country, which really, Lance, Iran and I think I mentioned Iran and Lebanon used to be 2 of the most beautiful countries in the Middle East. And it wasn't, though, until I got there. And, the beautiful country, the people were nice, although there were demonstrations occurring because of the Shah. And so, and you don't want to alert your family, right? Your kids, they don't want to alert you if there's something that's crazy going on. And it was a great duty. No one had anybody ever tell me that, Rocky, you're going to be held hostage for 444 days. There's no way. But it happened, and but it was a good duty up to that point in time. And of course, the Shah, I think that was their reason to really attack the American Embassy. They were looking for a reason to attack us. And when the Shah was allowed in, and then, of course, as we were in prison, we find out that the Shah died. So if you were taken because of the Shah, and now the Shah is dead, why are you still held? And we're in prison, and we find out from a sporting news from St. Louis, Missouri, because the guards would only give us sports material to read. And in the sporting news from St. Louis, Missouri, due to the death of the Shah of Iran, the tennis tournament was postponed. One of the guys were reading it. It's like, hey, the Shah's dead. What the hell are you talking about? No, it says it right here.
Wow.
And so we go to the...
So they didn't know that was in there. Like,
No,
had they
no.
known that was in there, they would have
It's
never
slipped.
given you that.
No,
Yeah.
and the St. Louis Sporting News, they put it in, hopefully thinking that the hostages are going to be able to read this.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were congratulated or saluted from President Reagan, I think it was, after we came home for
Yeah.
alerting us. But yeah, we find out in October that he had died July 27th, the day after my birthday. So you go to the door, Aveen Prison, it's a bad place. Concrete floors, concrete walls, bars, steel door. We pound on the steel door. The guard comes, "Chi," which means what? He said, "The Shah, he's dead. Why are we still here?" "No, we do not believe he is dead." It says it right here.
Yeah.
"No, we could not see the body. We don't believe he is dead." So they thought that the United States just made a fictitious, rumor that he was dead and thinking that they would give us up. Well, he closes the door and you look at each other like, all right, you thought maybe there was a chance that the Shah would come back. Now the Shah's dead. Why are we still here? The United States is not going to negotiate with these people. Little did I realize, you guys, $8.3 billion the United States gave Iran. So if you feed that animal, then you continue to feed him 44 years later. Why are they still taking hostages? Because we negotiate with them.
Was that on Jimmy Carter?
President Carter, yeah, he was the
Yeah,
president.
but I'm saying, was he the one? I mean, he got pushed around in this situation a lot, right?
Yeah, but you have to look at 44 years. He's not the only president that's been pushed around by the mullahs. The mullahs are thugs, and the Revolutionary Guard are terrorists. When we were taking our interrogations, consisted of basically propaganda of what the Shah had supposedly had done, and what the Salvac, his military, were doing. I want to go back, Ryan and Lance, to that country and to those individuals that took us, and I want to say, are you telling me that the mullahs are better than the Shah and that the Revolutionary Guard are better than Salvac? There is no way that they are better. And the people of Iran, you can't tell me that they have more freedom. Look at the women that they're killing because they're not wearing a scarf. I mean, they are held hostage as what we were to this day, 44 years later. So for them to criticize the Shah then and then to say that what they're doing now is good, I don't get it.
U.S. Marine Sergeant Rocky Sickmann is our guest. You can donate foldsofhonor.org, foldsofhonor.org, an amazing organization. Our friends at Bud Light help them a ton, but you can help them as well, foldsofhonor.org. Did any of the guards ever break? Like, were you able to build a personal relationship with any of the guards?
So you think about it, when you're held captive and you're locked in a room for 400 days, they would put different people in guard throughout time periods. And you always found the interesting ones were like the ones at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock. Barely spoke English. They were just ones, doing what they were supposed to. So you would try to sit there, and because you got no other information other than news from sporting material, which was sports related. Sometimes the guards would listen to BBC out in the corridor, and you would put your ear. It's probably why I have hearing aids now, but you used to put your ear underneath there to try to hear what was possibly happening. And so when you would go to the restroom, and you knock on the door, put a piece of paper underneath the door, the guard would come, "Gee, I got to go to the restroom," and then blindfold you, take you down, and you would say, different things, trying to get them to talk. "Do you speak English?" "I don't speak." And then, you'd go to the restroom, come back, and then they would put you into the room, and you'd stop the door and say, "Shalom alaikum, Allah shahobe." So you learned a little Farsi. And so you would try to get them to share different things of what was happening. I can tell you, I had one individual guard that would say, we are hostages as what you are hostages, because they were in this situation, and if they were to try to leave, they would probably be shot, which I wouldn't doubt it, the way that they deal with things over there. But you would try to gather information, and every guard would always say, Inshallah, which means with God's will, you will go home. But that was, 1979, 1980, 1981. And it was just, you were just holding on for hope and prayers.
And I think the date was, and you referenced 1975 when Vietnam was officially shut down.
Yeah.
And, and despicably, the way a lot of these veterans, when they returned home, they were just disrespected and they were shunned. And I take it was probably different. I think January 28th was the day you landed in St. Louis, 1981.
Yes.
And they're playing the Rocky theme, and it's more like this is how veterans should be recognized, right? I mean, was that a feel-good moment the first time you hug Jill, the first time you hug your parents?
Yeah, well, as the process was, after we left Iran on that Algerian aircraft, the night of January 20th, which I think I told you the story of how we were eventually put onto the aircraft, and all of a sudden they start closing the door. And you're looking around saying, whoa, where's everybody else at? And where's Kurt? Where's Gene? Where's Judy? Where's Debbie? And he said, no, you're the last. The others were let go a year earlier. We had
You had no idea.
No,
Oh, my
no, because I'm
gosh.
locked in a room with
Yeah.
2 other people for 400 days.
How did you draw the short straw?
United States Marine, I have no idea. But even though what the Islamic Republic of Iran wanted to do, they released all the blacks except for one. They were trying to get the black sympathy. And so I had 3 of my buddies that were Marines, that were African American. They were released. They don't want to be left behind, knowing that their buddies were being locked up. They didn't want to go home. They wanted to be with them. But here they were, put on an airplane. And they released all the women except for 2. And so we had no idea that we were the remaining 52 on that airplane that night. And so the door closed, and they assured us that, no, we've been here. And that's when they told us we came on January 17th. And January 17th is when the Islamic Republic of Iran received $8.3 billion in gold. 2 C-130s brought gold in, and this 727 Algerian aircraft landed right behind them. But Iran said, we will release the hostages when we want. And so what they were waiting to do was humiliate President Carter one last time. And that was January 20th. We get onto the airplane. The pilot broke in English, because you have no idea who these people. I hadn't seen a woman in 444 days. There's a pretty little stewardess. She takes me up and puts me down. And the pilot gets on and says, please, we must leave very quickly. So he taxis up. He stops, turns left. He taxis up, stops, turns left again, taxis up, stops. Starts accelerating, the plane's shaking, and all of a sudden it comes back down to an idle. And you're sitting there thinking, all this stuff has happened, and they're playing with us one last time. But we had no idea. The synchronicity of what was happening back home was the inauguration. So they had turned the runway lights off and waited until President Carter was out of office, 20 minutes, just to stab him in the back, and then they turned the runway lights off when President Reagan was in power. So you have to think about, what they did to President Carter, but then what did they do to President Reagan? 2 years later, they killed 240 Marines, which, Beirut, Iran recently admitted, we had involvement.
Yeah.
So it's like, and it all started November 4th. So the pilot comes back on, says the lights are on, we must leave. And so you're on that plane. The only thing you could hear was the sound of that plane, taxiing down. And you're wondering, was there a missile? Is somebody going to pop a missile? Is there a bomb on the plane? It wasn't until we got in Turkish airspace that the pilot came on and says, we're in the Turkish airspace. 2 fighters were escorting us to Algiers that we came unglued. And the pair of pants, I was telling you guys earlier, maybe I told you guys, I'd worn for over 200 days. My left cheek was completely hanging out of it. But here you were, you had heard some people when you were in prison. Maybe I'd heard Ryan, I heard Lance in another cell, but you never got to see them and talk to them. And here you were for the first time out of 444 days, had breakfast with you on November 4th. 1979, it's now January 20th, 1981. And so I turned 23 in that hole. And but you had a second chance in life. And we got to Algiers, we got to Athens, Greece. The pilot and stewardesses, they left and brought in new pilots, new stewardesses. They flew from Athens to Algiers. We got off the plane there in Algiers, kissed the ground. I mooned many people with my my hole in my pants. And people were hugging us and probably smelled bad and looked bad. But we boarded medevac planes. And as I was boarding this medevac plane, this young Air Force guy goes, "Mr. Sickmann, welcome home." I said, "How'd you know who I was?" He goes, "We've been following you for a year." Had no idea what people were doing. We get from Algiers to Wiesbaden, Germany. At Wiesbaden, Germany, the bed that they assigned to me, there's a letter. I was telling the guys at lunch, the letter that my parents had written me, they said by the time you received this letter, you had been freed. It was written January 15th, 1980. And it's a whole year later that we're released. And so we get to make our first phone call home. You walk down the hall, and in this room, there were like these little phone booths. And so I walked in and had my name over top the phone booth, and I walk in and I pick up the headset. I'm starting to push, and the lady goes, "Yes, Mr. Sickmann, can I?" I said, "How'd you know I'm Mr. Sickmann?" And she goes, "Well, you're in Mr. Sickmann's phone booth." And I said, "Well, yeah, that's me." And I said, "Well, I'd like to call home." She goes, "Well, I've been waiting for this call."
Wow. Look, I know we couldn't handle this. We talked to you before about how there were people cut from a different cloth. You're one of those guys, and you're one of the reasons we're here. Yeah. But the closest I ever got to it was watching the movie Argo, and I know that's laughable out loud, but that is one of those, and it's Oscar-worthy. It won Best Picture.
Yep.
But sitting back and watching that, and how on edge I was the entire movie for that small group of hostages that were able to get out of there. It's an amazing story. If you've never seen Argo, it is well worth the watch. And I think, from what I hear, the accuracy is pretty spot on, right?
I can tell you that my son was in the movie, and I don't know if I told you the story about that, but it was 2011. My wife and I are in Columbus, Ohio, and we're at a wedding. Father of the bride goes, "Rocky, I want you to meet my sister. She's a casting director." My son, ever since he was 6 years old, wanted to be an actor. And so he knew this. I gave a card to his sister. She left, went out to L.A. 3 days later, she's emailing her girlfriend, asking her, "Hey, what are you working on?" Girlfriend comes back, "I'm working on a movie about the Iran hostage crisis with Ben Affleck, Alan Arkin, John Goodman, and a cast of others." And the girl that we just met, she goes, "I was just with one of the hostages past weekend." And she goes, "Really? Who was that?" She goes, "Rocky Sickmann." And the girl comes back and says, "Wait, Rocky, he was one of the Marines, right?" And they're typing, and she goes, "Yeah." He goes, "His character, Sergeant Sickmann, is in the movie." I had no idea there was a movie being produced. But the movie is about, you're right, 6 of my fellow colleagues. 3 of them I had breakfast with the morning of November 4th.
Wow.
Here we were talking about how the upcoming Marine Corps birthday, November 10th, and we're at breakfast talking about how fun it was going to be. The other embassies were going to come over. And they left to go to the Visa building, which was on the backside of the American compound. I walked down to the Chancery, which is in the front. As we were being attacked from the front, they were in the back in another building watching everything. So they realized that the government wasn't coming. Nobody was there to help. It was going to be 18 hours before the United States got any help to us. So they destroyed the plates, and they left to go to the Canadian ambassador. Interesting story about Canadian ambassador, Ken Taylor. When I got there, October 7th of 1979, we had a clay court right behind the ambassador's house. And I played tennis in Asia and Europe and in the U.S. I get to Iran, I'd never played clay court, so I got to be pretty good. The ambassador one day, during detail, he goes, "Rocky, I noticed you're a pretty good tennis player. Would you mind being my partner?" I said, "Sure, I'd be honored. Who do we have to play?" He goes, "We have to play the Canadian ambassador." The week before we're taken hostage, we smoked Ken Taylor and his assistant. The next week, he rescues our 6 people. So I can tell you the attack that morning, when we went to the red carpet premiere, my son, he was in the movie. as a mail delivery guy in the CIA room, I got to speak to the cast of Argo. But I can tell you, when we went to the movie, the sound of it, it made my left leg twitch. And my wife was sitting to my left, and she goes, "Are you all right?" And I said, "No, it's just the sounds are just so real." Billy Gallegos, the guy I spent 400 days with, he came out, and he and his wife, and he goes, "Yeah, they do. They sound so real." And so what he did was create that, there are pictures that are out there. And that's why last night I had a picture of the first day of when we were attacked and how they came over the wall. And I told everybody, I said, "I'll give you $1,000 if you can find a security guard that was on guard duty that morning." There was none. It was like they told them to go home and just let the radicals. What isn't correct, as I told Ben, I said, that's not how they got into the American embassy. They got into the American embassy. As I said, 7 Marines held that embassy. I was at the front door, and the plaster started to fall from around the front door of the American embassy where I just came in, and we had 4-inch secured door, had my sawed-off shotgun, and my snub-nosed State Department-issued pistol. That's all we had to secure an American embassy. No host government protection. And I'm sitting there loading my shells, and I'm dropping my shells. I mean, my adrenaline's pumping. I mean, and you're sitting there thinking, here I'm a little kid from Krakow, Missouri, and this is where I'm going to be ending my day. And you're loading, and about this time, they're pounding on the front steel door, and the plaster is starting to come from around the door. So I radioed for assistance. 3 other Marines came. 2 Marines are kneeling, 2 are standing, just, pointing the shotgun at the front door. Because at that point in time, I mean, it's an attack. It's deadly force. And all of a sudden, down in the basement, Billy radios and says they've gotten in. So I break away. I'm the closest to the step. I break away, don my gas mask as I'm going in. And, in training in the Marine Corps, they put you through this training. And all of a sudden, when the time shit hits the fan, I mean, you go through this training, you don't realize you're doing it. And I get down there, my gas mask is on, and that's, there are things, guys, that, trust me, I have post-traumatic stress. How do you not have post-traumatic stress out of 444 days? But you don't forget those little things, like, my gas mask going from clear to fog, and down the corridor, Billy points, and you can see a bellow of smoke, and all of a sudden, around the corner, come 4 Iranian women in black chadors. And the men are pushing them forward because they knew the mindset that we would not shoot unarmed innocent women. And we're being screamed, "Don't fire, don't retaliate, help is on the way." There was no help coming. We backed up as far as we could to the steps, and tear gas was popped, and then they fled the building. We got up to post 1, got everything, went up to the very top of the embassy. And we secured ourselves behind the most secure part of the American embassy, and we barricaded the door. And again, many of my fellow colleagues had already been taken, because when you close that front door, that chancery, nobody could get in, nobody could get out. So people that couldn't run fast, they were immediately taken. So they started to bring those individuals that had been taken before and start bringing them up to the door, as we were still enjoying what that American flag represents, and that's freedom. They had already been taken of their freedom. And so now they're putting them up against the door, and they've got a gun to their head and saying, "They got a gun to my head. If you don't open the door, they're going to shoot me." So our folks were on the horn with President Carter, and that was when President Carter said, "Hey, it's going to be 18 hours before we get any help. Just give yourself up, and we'll get this resolved with diplomacy."
Phew.
And so that was, we removed everything. The Marines were the first ones out, not knowing what they were going to do, and they were getting ready to close the door if something happened. But we were the first ones out, and that's, like I said, for the next 400 days, blindfolded, tied, or else handcuffed. And what hurts me the most, you guys, and I've told so many people, is that day of November 4th is the day that the war on terrorism started. And they have never been held accountable for what they did. And a Muslim is not born with hatred. There's many Muslims within our country that love what we enjoy here, and they follow the Quran religion. But the mullahs have taken the Quran and used it for their benefit. And they teach hatred, and that's what hurts. That they have taught this hate. This November 4th, you mark my word, and I hope I'm wrong, but you will watch the news and you will see them burn the American flag in Iran. You show me where we burn the Iranian flag in our country, or where we burn, a Jewish flag. Well, there's a lot of demonstrations now. There are a lot of people burning, but they want to eliminate the Jewish population. I mean, we don't live in a society like that. We have freedom of religion, freedom to express. But when you start teaching that, that's not how I teach my kids. I mean, I don't teach them to remove a race. So, but 44 years later, we've allowed it to happen, and they run free.
Do you happen to have a vivid memory of the first time you heard the Star Spangled Banner after 444 days?
Yeah.
I mean, that had to. I mean, the song itself. I mean, as it just represents freedom. I mean, that had to be.
You guys, that day on November 4th, how they took our flag and burnt it.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it was like, you thought this is going to be over, but no, it was just a start.
Yeah.
It was just a start of continuous burning, killing of Americans, hostage taking, and we've never held them accountable. And that's why I regret not ever pulling that trigger. My wife hates this when I say it. Because I had a chance to pull that trigger. Now, granted, I wouldn't be here. Plus, I probably would have gone down as a Marine that started World War III. But at least they would have gotten. Plus, I wanted them to feel the pain I was feeling for those first 30 days being tied and then being locked in a room for 4. Can you guys imagine being locked in this room for 4?
Not at all.
But
Not at all.
I've got one final question for you, though, and this is kind of weird. But with the PTSD, which is a real thing, with the time lost from Jill and from your parents, 444 days, if you had an opportunity to go back to November 3rd, would you leave and go to the States, or would you go through what you've gone through just because of who you are now and the messages that you can give to everybody out there?
That's a good question. I think, the Marine Corps, when I graduated from high school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I wanted to see the world, and the world I saw, and plus I wanted to be a Marine security guard. And going through that, and had somebody told me that, hey, Rocky, you're going to have to spend 444 days here. It might have been a little easier, but not knowing was hard. But, you do learn a lot about yourself. And I can tell you that whenever I feel like I have to do something, like speak to 7,000 people, I go back to when I was put up against the wall with 3 rifles to the back of my head. And I sit there and think, if I can do that, I can easily speak to 7,000 people. I mean, because this is nothing, as opposed to I survived that. And but what hurts is the guys that lost their life, they gave their life for me. What they would never have, and their families. And that's where Folds of Honor is all about, is providing scholarships to children, spouses of fallen and disabled military, and also now first responders. I can't bring those guys back. But what we can do is honor their sacrifice, educate their legacy through Folds of Honor. And that's why Bud Light, $3 million from October 17th to November 26th. For first responders, they have a chance to apply for a scholarship. And so it is a benefit, and it's a therapeutic piece for me, Folds of Honor is right now, to go through, because 3 of my colleagues committed suicide when they came home. It's because everybody takes it. And a psychiatrist, when I came home, said, Rocky, there's 2 ways that you can deal with this. One way, you keep it inside, but something's going to cause you to break. Or the other is you use it as a stepping stone, and you go through life and use it. And so what I try to do, and trust me, it's hard, but tell the story about those 8 and the sacrifices. And each day, I earn each day a memory of them. I try to tell that story.
Well, it's the greatest country in the universe because of men like you and ones that didn't come home. And you can support them at foldsofhonor.org, foldsofhonor.org, and do what we as Americans have an obligation to do, and that's take care of those families.
Yes.
Idiots like us appreciate the freedom. We don't fight for it. So the least we can do is take care of the United States veteran and the families of those that are left behind.
Well, thank you for what you guys are doing to help educate everybody, because freedom is not free. And again, it's something that we must remind them and teach. And so you guys are doing that. So I salute you.
Well, thank you. We salute you. Foldsofhonor.org. Sergeant Rocky Sickmann, a true American hero, and you could support everything at foldsofhonor.org.